Again, good morning. Thank you for joining us for our webinar on franchises with presenter Peter Pappas. You can see Peter on the screen right now. Peter is an independent consultant on business purchase and sale, focusing on exit strategy and execution. Prior to this, he was the regional director of the Connecticut Small Business Development Center at the University of Connecticut. I'm your moderator, Renee Goodnow from the New York Small Business Development Center. We will have time for Q&A at the end of today's webinar, but please don't hesitate to type your questions in the questions box as they come up. And with that, I will turn things over to you, Peter.
Good morning. Welcome to all of our participants. This is the first time I'll be doing this presentation. It was part of a big half-day presentation on purchase and sale and valuation of a closely held business. But that was aimed at counselors, SBDC counselors across the nation. Now, when I'm doing it for clients, I carved it out because either you're working a franchise or you're not. So last month or 2 months ago, we took a month off. I did a presentation on purchase and sale of a business. This one is on whether you're considering a franchise. You could be considering a franchise from a franchising company like McDonald's headquarters, or you could be considering buying a franchise, an existing franchise from an existing franchisee, like the McDonald's down the street. So the first thing I want to talk about is, what is a franchise exactly? It is not the same as owning an independent business. It is actually nothing more than a license to operate someone else's business system. And the key word there is business system. You're renting a system that's developed, a business package. You're not going to start a business. You're going to be fitting yourself into an existing system. This license will have a limited term, usually about 10 years, with renewal and transfer conditions. That's one of the things that I'm going to be talking about later on the legal part. These systems should be thoroughly organized. When you get into a franchise, they should be able to turn you into an operator in less than a week. And I've seen this many times. It's not that they're rushing you through training. There'll be on-the-job training. There'll be an area manager that will visit you. Your training will be ongoing until you're able to operate sufficiently. But the formal training will be less than a week. These businesses, therefore, are extremely consistent, and consistency is everything in a business. Most of my small business clients have problems with marketing because they're not offering a consistent product. They're constantly changing up the menu, changing up the product, changing the way they deliver their services. With a franchise, you're going to do it exactly the way every other franchise is doing it. So it's not true entrepreneurship, but it's not like a job, because you do have a great deal of control over your success and your future income as a franchise. As a matter of fact, commonly I hear from franchisees who are doing it for the first time these words: I have never worked this hard in my life. The reason is because the harder you work, the more money you make. Unlike waiting for the boss to recognize your productivity and give you a raise, in a franchise, the harder you work, the more you take home each and every week. So there are advantages to a franchise. Statistically, they're less likely to fail than a startup. 4 out of 5 startups fail within the first 5 years. Only 1 out of 5 franchises fail in the first 5 years. Because of that consistency, because they're a proven business model, the advantage is that you're going to be trained to operate in a consistent fashion. If you open your own business, you're going to learn as you go along. In a franchise, from day one, you know exactly what you're going to be doing each and every day and how you're going to do it. You'll have an area coach who will take care of further training, make sure that you are achieving expected goals in terms of sales, profit, cost. You'll have established supply chains. You won't have to go shopping for product. They're going to tell you exactly where to get it. The downside is sometimes they get a kickback from those exclusive suppliers, but all in all, you're going to be able to buy cheaper from their exclusive suppliers than you would if you went shopping. You're going to have complete policy manuals, employee job descriptions, training manuals. You won't have to develop this. Typically, a small business startup, their first hire is experimental. They don't even know, they know they need help, but they don't know what they're going to have this person doing. They know they don't want them to cash out and go to the bank. They don't want them to interact with certain customers, but what do they want them to do to help? In a franchise, each and every job in that franchise is well defined. And you have common metrics. That means you are going to be able to compare yourself, your performance with identical businesses across the country. So you don't need a business plan. They're going to hand you theirs and you're going to execute it. You have very little chance of departing from this. Matter of fact, they won't allow you to. So you don't have to develop your own business. And I've worked with a lot of startups and they do a detailed business plan about how they're going to do it. And then the day they open, they find that they have to make running changes to address the market conditions that they weren't aware of. Environmental conditions, meaning the competition, the job, the pool of available employees and so forth. If you have a franchise, you don't need a plan. You will get a plan that is proven, except with a new franchise, and we'll talk about that later. And this is what you not only can determine what your life is going to be like running this franchise, you had better figure it out before you sign on that dotted line, because that is your life. So I advise you, if you're considering a franchise, to go to several of those operating outlets and see what people are doing, see what the manager is doing, and figure out if that's the life you want, because once you sign on that dotted line, that is what you're going to be doing. Now, the franchise also has some disadvantages. They are going to control when you open, when you operate. Your first day of opening will be contractual. You will have to comply with the rules, the operating manual. You can't say, I know a better way to make this hamburger. Too bad. You've got to make it exactly like every other franchise in the country. Your signage, the way your store will presents itself to the public is out of your control. You can't even put up a poster in the window without their permission. They have certain intellectual property, their trademarks, their patents, their trade dress. Trade dress means the way their stores look, and their know-how. All of that is going to be made available to you under restrictions. You may not be able to put the logo on your car without their permission, and they may not want you to. They are going to control what products and services you offer, where you get them, how you make them, what you do. You will pay for a franchise a royalty for all of this package, business package, on its top line, a percent of sales, typically 5 to 8% of sales. On top of that, you may pay an extra 1 to 3% for national advertising. You can't change the rules. They can anytime. And this has been a problem. And I'll get to adverse promotion later on. And you have a lot of limits on exit strategy. You can basically walk away with nothing or walk away with a penalty. You may not be allowed to sell it to a buyer that you have. They may not approve the buyer. You may not be able to pass it on to family. These are things that are contractual, and I'll tell you how to find out what those are before you sign on the line and how to negotiate a better deal. And when you do that, you have to have an idea of what you want. You can never negotiate for a better deal if you don't have an idea of what is better for you. For example, not being able to sell it to pass it on to your child might not be important to you. Your child might be a lawyer and you don't like them. So always negotiate for what you feel is important, which requires you to think about the future you, in addition to the present you. So let me tell you, if you are considering a franchise, you are going to get the hard sale. They're going to give you, they're going to promote to you. They may bring you to the headquarters and with a bunch of other prospective franchises, put on a dog and pony show, the purpose of which is to tell you how wonderful it is and how you better hurry, hurry, hurry and sign, because if you don't, you'll miss the once-in-a-lifetime chance. Don't ever fall for that. Once-in-a-lifetime chances happen all the time. There are always chances to do something in business. And remember, you're making a 10-year commitment. You don't want to make a 10-year commitment by watching an hour infomercial. Research the franchise before you get the franchise. I told you, this is going to be your life. You want to know what it's like. I'm going to go into detail later on how to go about this research, but research on the internet. You can find on the internet instances where people post very negative reviews of just about anything. And you've got to sort through them to figure out whether these are angry people or whether these are betrayed people. And there's no substitute for going out in person. If it's a good franchise, then an operator would be willing to talk to you about it if he doesn't see you as a competition. So drive a little ways to talk to somebody who isn't going to feel you're invading his market. Learn the industry. Their training is no substitute for experience in the industry. I had a person get a franchise back in Connecticut where I used to live. And I met them. It was a bakery franchise. It was some kind of bread bakery franchise. And I met the guy, very enthusiastic, first week of operation. And I said, how did you choose this franchise? And I figured he'd say, well, my dad was a baker, or I used to work in a bakery, or I love to bake. But that's not what he told me. He said, we were teachers and we retired. And we wanted a business. We didn't want to sit around. And we looked at several franchises. We looked at an oil change franchise. We looked at this franchise, and he listed all these diverse businesses. And I thought, oh my God, you had no idea what those industries were like. The guy never changed oil in a car before. He never baked a loaf of bread, and he was considering buying a business. The business lasted a year, and I told you franchises usually have a much better survival rate than a regular business. And I attribute that to the fact that he didn't know what he was getting into. He didn't know how to bake bread. He let them tell him how to bake bread. He didn't understand how to sell bread. He let them tell him how to do it. So get some industry experience. If you're going to go into a restaurant franchise, you really should understand what it's like to be in the restaurant business. I was, and I tell you, people go into it all the time and they're shocked at things like how to diffuse issues between employees. I'll give you an example. In the restaurant business, the cook is working very hard. It's hot, it's hard work, it's busy, and he's proud of what he's doing. And a waitress picks up a plate and said, "You made it wrong. You made it wrong again. Do it over." Now, she just said he did a lousy job. He is overworked, and he gets angry, and he's got a knife. If you don't understand what to do in a situation like that, you shouldn't be in the restaurant business. Study the franchise disclosure document. It used to be called the Uniform Offering Circular. It is a required document. I'm going to go through it step by step to explain what's in it. You can go online and figure out and find out what's in it, but I'm going to tell you what to look for and what to consider when you're looking. Nothing in the franchise disclosure document or the contract that is said verbally is enforceable. Remember, they're going to give you some hard sell. They're going to tell you could be a millionaire. But if it's not in writing, it's not enforceable. And you can ask questions. And I've seen many times somebody will come to me and say, "I'm interested in this franchise." And I'll tell you what it was. It was something called Candy Bouquet. And I looked at the franchise disclosure document, which has to disclose a complete list of everybody who's operating and everybody who has been operating but left the system within 2 years. Twice as many stores left the system closed than were open. And I said, "This is concerning. You should ask them about that." And they dismissed it. They said, "Oh, well, some people just aren't made to be in business." Well, that's not true. That was a statistic I'd never seen before. There were thousands of candy bouquets across the country. Now there's 5 in 2 states. The concept didn't have traction. So let's look at the franchise disclosure document. What is in it? There are 20 some odd required sections by law. And remember, whenever something is required by law, there's a great deal of latitude on how it can be done. So you need to read well into this. First section is just who the franchisor is. Sounds simple, but there's things to look for. How many different concepts are bundled into this company? They may have a restaurant, several different franchise offerings. Is that bad? Not necessarily, but it would lead me to believe that their business is franchising, not operating franchises. You need a balance. If the company is going to have lawyers because they're doing contractual work all the time. The company is going to have salespeople because they're selling franchises. But what do they have to support the franchises? Do they have somebody who, if they're in the restaurant business, do they have somebody who has operating experience, like vice president of operations for a chain of restaurants? That would be good. Another lawyer? That's not good, because they're not going to help you become successful as much as they are going to sell you the franchise and leave you twisting in the wind. Then who works for this franchising? Who are those lawyers and salesmen and experts and so forth? So you want to look for experience in the industry, restaurant people, if you're in a restaurant franchise, automotive people, if you're an oil change franchise. And they'll also have to disclose if there's ever been litigation, if they've ever had a lawsuit, if they've ever been charged with a crime. And you may have to look outside of the franchise disclosure document to find out how these things came out, or what really was claimed and how valid were the claims. Lawsuits and criminal actions are public record. We could find out where the lawsuit was filed and go online with the clerk of that court and find out all the filings. Don't be alarmed if one of the executives was charged at one time with franchise fraud. Now that sounds like stupid, doesn't it? Well, one thing that constitutes franchise fraud is if they're making more money selling franchise than the franchises are making selling product. Now, in the beginning, just about every franchise is in that condition. So they may be charged with franchise fraud, and the charge was dropped. So finding the outcome, once again, is very important. But franchise fraud, I think just about every executive in franchising has been charged with franchise fraud at one time or another. So it's in the details, not the disclosure. Has there ever been a bankruptcy? That in itself is not an alarm. Once again, what happened? A lot of times bankruptcy is a reorganization and the business comes out stronger and better than ever. So look into the details. Now the franchise disclosure document is probably going to tell you everything is la-di-da, don't worry about it. Find out what happened from the bankruptcy court. Bankruptcy is done in federal courts. If you know what city it was filed, which would have to be disclosed, you can look up the details and be prepared to fall asleep reading them, because there's going to be a lot of blah, blah, blah written by lawyers. But at least you'll know what was changed, what was the cause of the bankruptcy, what was the outcome. And then the initial fees. You may have to pay a fee upfront, thousands of dollars, for the training, for the materials, for the license. What is due upfront and what is refundable if you start taking the training, for example, and you say, oh my God, I can't do this. Of course, they'll let you off the hook, but how much of that upfront fee will you get back? And there may be a schedule about if you do this much, you get this much back. If you never start training, you get that much back. This is something you can negotiate. They will tell you that their contract is set in stone and non-negotiable. Nothing is non-negotiable. If you walk, they'll come after you and say, well, come on, what do you want? What are the other fees? Is there an ongoing training fee? What is the advertising fee? Advertising could be a big expense. Typical McDonald's spends 3% of sales, and it's sent to the national McDonald's, and the advertising is done as they please. As a franchisee, you may have very little control over your advertising. In some cases, they'll give you an ad that you could pay to put on the radio station. But in most cases, they're going to decide what media and what message to send out. And then there's the estimated initial investment. Now, if you're going to do a franchise like my ill-fated friends, the bakers, the bread bakers, they had to buy all that equipment, the ovens, the proofers, the mixers, everything, the refrigerators. In a freestanding franchise like a Burger King, the franchisee builds the building to the specifications of the franchisor using contractors named by the franchisor, but all that is a huge initial investment. And they're required to give you an estimate, a fair estimate. Now, bear in mind that if you live in New York State, your cost of building out a franchise is going to be much higher than somebody in Wyoming. It's just the way it is. You New Yorkers pay for a little more for everything. So consider local equalization. And you can ask some other franchises in your market area, in your state, what did you really spend? And I'll tell you how to approach them later. There will be restrictions on purchasing. I talked about that a little bit before. I told you they'll be probably hidden kickbacks, which really aren't an evil thing in themselves. It depends on you getting a good deal for your purchases. And in some cases, franchisees have gone to the franchisor and say, we can buy napkins for half on the open market. You're ripping us off. And you know what? The franchisor backed off. There are many causes for dispute between franchisees and franchisors, and I'll talk about some of the big ones. What are your obligations? What are your rules? How is the royalty paid? Well, it's very common in a franchise that the franchisee is no more than a manager, and he collects all the money, all the receipts, and puts them at the bank at the end of the day and never sees them again. He has no ability to touch that money. The franchisor takes the money, takes their royalty off the top, pays all the bills, pays the rent, pays the payroll, pays the suppliers, and anything that's left over at the end of the month goes back to the franchisee. Some cases, the franchisee gets a weekly draw against that, so he doesn't have to wait till the end of the month to buy his groceries. But understand how the money is handled and what financing arrangements are they offering. They will always say, we can get you financing. You're free to make other arrangements. Some franchisees go to a bank and get an SBA guaranteed loan. There's no such thing as an SBA loan. The SBA doesn't lend money, it guarantees loans to the bank. To get an SBA loan, you don't go to the SBA, you go to a bank that is a qualified SBA lender. So you're free to make your own arrangements. But in any case, when you finance anything in business, the finance company, the third party, is in the law, under the law, a holder in due course, which means you are required to pay them back the financial advance they give you, the money they advance you, regardless of the outcome with the franchise. If you have a franchise for, let's say, a procedure to eliminate fat, to take fat off people, you know, like these treatments, you know, mostly done by doctors. But let's say the franchise is subsequently, it fails, and all of the units are left out operating without the headquarters help, or what they're doing is partly declared illegal. You still owe that finance company the full amount. What is the obligation of the franchisor? What do they owe you as a franchisee? What are their duties to you? And you're going to, the sales hype will say one thing, and when they put it in writing, it's not going to be the same. The territory. What is your exclusive territory? This is probably the #1 dispute between franchisees and franchisors. The territory is short. It's called a short territory lawsuit. For example, Butterfly Life, women's fitness. Their target market is women between 25 and 50. And the franchisor offered a territory with 100,000 population, but it was in a very expensive place to live. It was in a high-end area of Connecticut, and it had 100,000 people, but they were mostly older, because in order to afford to live there, you had to be at the peak of your career. So they didn't have that many younger women who were the target market for the Butterfly Life. You have the federal government on your side in this consideration. The US Census publishes data by census tract, which is smaller than a zip code, smaller than a fire district. And you could find out in the territory they're offering you exactly how many people are in the target market, because the census captures data by gender, by age, by household income, all free of charge on their website. The franchise disclosure document will discuss the trademarks. It'll list them and tell you what you can and can't do with them. Patents, copyrights, trade secrets, trade dress. You will get a restricted license to use those as they wish you to use them and for no other purpose. You may not be able to put their logo on your business card if they say they don't want you to. Your obligation to operate. You must operate. You must open your store on the hours that they say. But here's something interesting. You have an obligation to operate. Will they allow you to operate more than one unit? And that's critical in some franchises. There are more Subway sandwich shops than any other franchise in the world, but based on their own published data, the average Subway shop does about $300,000 a year in sales. If you're really good in the restaurant business with $300,000 in sales, you might get $25,000 a year at the end on the bottom line. That's not a lot for all that work. So in the Subway sandwich franchise, the key to success is for the franchisee to have more than one unit. They have 4, 5, 6 of them. They pay minimum wage help to assemble the sandwiches. And by having those multiples, they can make a decent living. That's called a multi-unit franchise or a master franchise arrangement. Find out whether that's possible. Going back to exclusive territory, will they give you the first refusal on adjoining territories? If you have the capital, you may want to have control over a larger market than the one single allotted territory. Restrictions on sale of goods and services I told you about. You're going to sell what they told you to sell, the way they told you to sell them. Very important, renewal, termination, modification. Do you have first refusal on renewal? Do you have first refusal at a price? What is the fee for renewal? Can they change the deal? Can they change the amount of the royalty? All of that is in here, and this is a negotiable thing. This is your future. At the end of the 10 years, what happens? Do they say thank you very much and goodbye, and you've lost that investment? Do they have to buy back all of your equipment and the building you paid to have built? And who can you transfer it to? It'll always say they have to approve, and the operator, get them to be specific. Do they have to have, what kind of financial wherewithal do they have to have? What kind of talent do they have to have? Can you sell to somebody who is just the way you were when you took out the franchise, or do you have to find a Superman? You need a lawyer to work this through with you unless you really understand legal documents and the effect they have on the future you. Lawyers spend most of their time and get most of their money warning clients of things that could go wrong. Public figures. Suppose they have Tom Brady say, I love the bread in this place, and he does commercials for them. Can you have a poster of Tom Brady in your store? Can you have a big cutout of Tom Brady that people get their pictures taken with? Probably not. These restrictions are not nasty things that would be deal killers, but understand what it means and what you can and can't do. Now, they have to give you representations of sales and net profit, but their sample can be biased. They can pick the best operators, the most successful operators, the operators in the best markets, put them all together and say, this is representative. So find out what's in the sample. And once again, corroborate with actual operators in similar markets to the one you'll be operating in. What does the average franchisee take home after everything is said and done? And where are these franchises they're saying are typical? If they're all in New York City, they have different economies, completely different rent, completely different volume than a place in upstate New York. And you will be asked to sign off that you received and understand the data. That's all, that you received it and you understand it. You're not saying it's true. So always look to the other franchises. They're required to give you a complete list of all franchise outlets present and those that left within the last 2 years. And look at franchise turnover. I told you about that Candy Bouquet had a terrible turnover, a real red flag. That's one of the red flags you see on new franchises, which I'll talk with you about some more. You are free to contact the franchisees, but they may be under gag orders. In the contract, there's probably a non-disparaging clause saying they cannot make disparaging remarks. But you can ask them, are you under a gag order? Are you restricted in what you can tell me? And they can answer that truthfully without violating the gag order. You should visit them in person, interview them in person. You can never tell whether they're rolling their eyes or grimacing when you talk to them over the phone or when they answer your email. And remember the cop shows. They ask the same question several ways to the same person and to different people to look for consistency, because only people who are telling the absolute truth don't have to remember what they said. Liars have to remember what they said. The financial statements of the franchisor, you look for strength and stability. You look for a good quick ratio, which is the ratio of current assets to current liabilities. You want to be sure they're going to be around, that they're strong. You want to see if they're getting their sales mostly from franchise sales or franchise revenue or royalties. Royalties is much better. That means they have successful franchisees. On the expense side, are they spending more to sell the franchises or to support their existing franchisees? Support is what you're looking for. Once you sign on the dotted line, you don't care how much they're working to sell the next franchise. A copy of the contract will appear in the franchise disclosure document, and it's negotiable. Remember that. And you have to acknowledge the receipt. All you're saying is, I got the book. It doesn't say that you read it, that you understand it. That's up to you. The primary franchise dispute issues. Understatement of startup investment. And I told you, if you're doing it in New York, they're going to give you an estimate that's low. If you're doing it in Wyoming, you're going to be able to probably do it cheaper. Short exclusive territory, I already talked to you about. Lack of ongoing support. In the contract, there should be some metric of support that you're going to receive. How often do they visit? How much time do they spend with you? What are they going to do? Are they just going to look at the figures? Are they going to inspect your methods? Are they going to watch your people do what they do to see if they're doing it the best way? Or are they just going to say, look at the top and bottom line, say, attaboy, keep at it? Detrimental promotion. I'll give you an example of that. A few years back, Burger King decided to put out a menu that grossly lowered prices. They were undercutting McDonald's, and it was stupid. They'll never put McDonald's out of business. McDonald's is so much bigger that McDonald's can afford to give away burgers until Burger King disappears. Well, the franchisees, the effect on the franchisees was they were losing money on every sandwich they sold under this promotion. And they complained. And the franchisor, Burger King International, said, hey, you signed on the dotted line, we get to call the shots. Well, they went to court and they won. The franchisees won because the Uniform Commercial Code says that no contract is enforceable if it requires the financial ruin of one of the parties. So they got it under Uniform Commercial Code rules, but it can happen again. The dollar menu, I'm sure, is a loser. Every time Subway runs a special on a sandwich on TV, think about what it costs to put that together and what that is doing to the franchisee. So this is a real dispute issue. You could start with your area manager and say, I can't afford to give away these sandwiches, and gradually go up the chain until you get somebody. And you may want to have a relationship with other franchisees so you can have a common voice in issues like these. I told you about transfer and assignment restrictions. You work your hard all your life to build up a whole bunch of Burger Kings, and now you want your children to take over. You want, and you've got a restriction. Here's another trip to the court. Renewal conditions, same situation. And courts hear these issues all the time. And there would be a history of these issues in item 2 in the franchise disclosure document. So talk to the other franchises with caution. Remember, they don't have to tell you the truth. There are a lot of new franchises. New franchises are created almost one a day because collecting royalties on franchises is a lot more lucrative financially and a lot less work than selling the goods and services. Collecting royalties on a McDonald's is a lot less work than selling all those sandwiches. So I told you a lot of them are new franchises are being created. I told you one of the biggest advantages of a franchise is the consistency, the proven system. Now you have a system that's not proven, may still be evolving. So they require special consideration. Are you getting in on the ground floor of the next McDonald's, the next great franchise, or are you joining the death spiral of a franchise like the one I told you about? Operating a new franchise requires much more knowledge and skills, especially in that industry, almost enough to open your own store. All right, so you're still getting the advantage of a franchise, but you need to be able to really know what you're doing because their training is still evolving. Their methods are evolving. Their menu is evolving. The services and the way they offer them is evolving. And believe me, there are so many franchises for just about anything. There are franchises for house cleaning. There are franchises that sell franchises. That's right. There's a franchise called FranNet, and they're franchised operators. People come to them and say and consider several different franchises, and they help them decide. So you need to be a partner with the franchisor if it's a new franchise, and that you need to find out early on whether you have the opportunity to do so, where they're treating you like they know everything and you're just going to do what they tell you. A good franchisor that has a new concept is going to welcome operators that can help develop the concept. He's not going to say, I know what I'm doing, you follow my rules. He's going to say, yes, I do want your feedback as you open and as you develop your market. So there's less detail to be disclosed in the franchise disclosure document because there's less history. They may have only a few franchises and they're probably run by management of the company, relatives of the management of the company, friends of the of the management of the company. So their performance is going to be atypical. Look at the qualifications of the people in charge of both the existing franchises and the franchisor. If the people running those franchises are industry experts, they've been cherry-picked to get the franchise going. So unless you have the same expertise, your experience will not be the same. Like I said, will they be partners or are they going to be bosses? And their financials and they're not going to show a strong income statement, balance sheet as would a established franchisor, as any startup business is not going to be financially strong as a well-established business. This is not to say don't go after these new franchises, but consider these extra items. What about the concept? Do they have a market strength? Do they have a unique selling point, something that will make customers change their buying habits? Or are they just another tire store? Me too. I call that Me Too promotion. I'm thinking that they'll get a piece of the market just because they open their doors and it's a big market. You don't get anything by opening your door. You have to change the buying habits of the public. And if you've ever tried to change the behavior of a child, changing the behavior of an adult is more difficult. So would reasonable people change their buying habits, their behavior, to start using this solution to their need rather than the one they've been using? Can you deal with the target market? If you don't like truck drivers, you certainly don't want a truck stop franchise. Try becoming a customer for the franchise. See what the customer experience is like. See if that unique selling point does exist and whether it works on you. How well established are all these things that deliver consistency to the customer? Is the trade dress established? Do their stores look consistent? Or are they still redecorating, trying to find out a prettier way to do things? Do they look the same, or do they look like they don't belong to the same troop? And what is the training program? If they're training it only in a unit, a franchise unit, that means they don't have a place to train you, an official school set up to train you. You're going to be training while other people are doing their job and customers are trying to get served. And how detailed is the operation manual? Are they printing it to order? That means they're still writing it. Can you understand it? Is the operation manual detailed enough for you to go out there and follow it and be successful, or does it leave a lot of questions unanswered? So once again, don't fall for the hard sell. Don't believe that if you pass this by, you'll never get this opportunity again in your lifetime. If you're out looking to start a business or open a franchise, there are millions of opportunities, believe me, and they're coming up all the time. If they dismiss your questions or are otherwise evasive, then you evade them, you go away. And remember, what is your status? If they have franchises that are third parties, not insiders, those are the ones you want to talk to. Are these guys listening to you, or do they leave you out there twisting in the wind? I've been accused many times of saying I'm against franchises. I'm not. I'm doing what lawyers do. I'm trying to make you aware of what could go wrong and what to look for. I'm just trying to inform you and tell you how to get further informed and go to the SBDC, New York SBDC, or wherever state you're in. Find out where the nearest office is, and you will get free of charge counseling from experts. They may not be experts in everything, but in their network, they have experts in everything. They'll help you understand what a franchise means. They'll help you evaluate the franchise disclosure document and help you understand the information you're getting from other franchisees, how to do financial projections, help you decide whether to take the financing from the franchisor, the bank, or whatever. And there are non-traditional lenders, which are economic development motivated bodies that have money to lend to create jobs and open businesses in the community, because that's good. That means payroll and taxes, and local governments love having both of them in their city. And they'll help you evaluate the life. A lot of people, when they're thinking of opening a business or buying a franchise, are a little bit starstruck and get a little bit obsessed that that's what they want. You need someone to talk to interview you about what this is really like, rather than what your fantasy is. SBDC counseling services are free of charge. There are some fees for some of their classes, for the materials, the books. Other classes, like the one you're listening to right now, are free. At least I hope you didn't pay anything. The other thing the SBDC counselors offer is complete confidentiality. This is important. According to the Code of Federal Regulations, they have to give you complete confidentiality, like attorney-client. If you tell them you're doing something wrong, if they find out you're not paying taxes, they're not required to turn you in. They'll help you get in compliance. Very important. If they're in your office and you open the closet and there's a severed head on the shelf, they're going to tell somebody about that. But as far as anything you're doing wrong in your business, it's just between you and them. So I've reached the end of my talk. I'll stay for questions and answers as long as there are questions. I know it's supposed to be an hour and we've only got 7 minutes left, but if you've got a question, I would be delighted to hear.
Great, thank you so much, Peter. We did have a question come in, and it was in reference to creating a franchise in New York. So Michelle said, creating a franchise in New York is so expensive. Can I create a similar system without creating an official franchise, something similar to Starbucks?
Yes, only in America. In a lot of countries, the term make money, as in he opened his own coffee shop and made money, it doesn't occur in their language because they don't have the opportunity, but you do. If you want to open a coffee shop, you can model it on Starbucks. It better not look like a Starbucks. You better not call your beverages the same as Starbucks. You can't have a grande size, but you can do it. The franchise gives you a better chance of success statistically. It gives you a running start. You're not going to learn by doing. You're going to open up the first day and be a Starbucks. But yes, by all means, if you see a franchise, you think they've got a good concept, you can copy them to a great extent, as long as you appear different. The standard is, as long as it doesn't create confusion in the marketplace, as long as people clearly see that you're not a Starbucks, that you're whatever brand of coffee shop you choose. Next question.
Thank you. We'll give it a minute for more questions to roll in. We did have one ask about the recording and the slides. We'll make the recording available shortly after. We're not going to send it with the slides separately because we want the audio to stay with the slide deck. So we won't have the PowerPoint to download, but we will have that webinar recording available shortly after.
I think that's very important. If you get the slides, you could easily interpret them incorrectly, but if it comes with my audio, you've got a better chance of capturing what this presentation was supposed to teach you.
Thank you. So Michelle had a follow-up to that one. She meant, can I start a system myself, not if modeling a franchise that already exists? If I want to create a child care center model, how can I sell that to have others be able to buy it without creating a franchise?
When is a franchise not a franchise? Well, there are many examples of things that appear to be franchises that are not franchise, such as exclusive product. There's a line of solar sensitive clothing. Del Sol is the name of the store. It's not a franchise. Those operators have an exclusive buying arrangement with Del Sol. There are certain rules of that. They do not have the franchise relationship. And that's important because having a franchise relationship gives the franchisees a lot of legal rights in dealing with the franchisor. If you're not a franchise, you don't have that to deal with that. So how do you do that? How do you get your concept licensed without creating a franchise? Well, by having a license, by having a license to use your training materials, your policy and procedure, and by having an agreement that says this is not a franchise relationship. Now, a franchise, what you're giving up is the control the franchisor has. Once you give these materials out, and if they change them enough so that they're not violating your intellectual property rights, you've lost them. Also, how are they going to pay you? Are they going to pay you a commission? Are they going to pay you a piece of the action off the top of the line, off the sales, or off the profit? I think this is something you need to sit down with a counselor, SBDC counselor, one-on-one, and map out what you have and what you could offer a partner who would operate under your system, and what you can and can't do.
Thank you. And I'll put the link in to the chat for folks if they do need to make an appointment with the New York SBDC. They can use the link in their chat right now. And if you need an SBDC out of New York State, definitely you can check one out on the SBA's website. And you could also do a search for an SBDC in your state. For the next question, Angela asks, what do you think about using franchise brokers to help sell?
Using a franchise broker? Yeah. They have a purpose like any broker. They can help you select the right product, in this case, the franchise. They can evaluate your ability to match the needs of operating that franchise. So it's not like they're add-on overhead for nothing. Now, many people can do this on their own, can evaluate different concepts, different franchises, but the broker may help, may be a great help. And like with any product or service you buy, find out what you're getting before you buy it. What is that broker going to do? What performance are they going to do for you that brings enough value to this proposition to make it worth their cut? I think
Thank you. And
starting with an SBDC counselor is the way to evaluate a franchise. And you may not need a broker, but that is entirely up to you, whether you think it would help.
Thank you. And they followed up to that specifically if they are a new franchisor.
Oh, if the franchise is new, I went through a lot of extra consideration you have to do. I don't think most brokers work with new franchises because they want to sell a known product. They don't want to get involved in trying to promote something that they don't have a good handle on what exactly it is. the broker wants a good outcome for their customer too. They depend on the success of the people that use their services. So I don't think a broker is going to want to work with a new franchise. If they are, then that they certainly could help you evaluate that.
Thank you. As far as finances, Fawn asked, how do you become eligible for a loan for a franchise? Isn't there hundreds of thousands of dollars that need to be put down before the bank will loan the rest?
The same way you get qualified for any other loan, you have to have good credit. If you don't have good credit, work on it. Get a copy of your credit report and see what is on it that is not complimentary, and you have the right to protest those. And if the original person that said that you didn't pay them doesn't respond within 60 days, it goes off your credit report. If you heard what I just said, just protesting some of these things will get them off your report. Good credit means paying your bills on time. The on time is as critical as paying them. A late payment to a credit card is worse than a non-payment, because if you don't pay the installment on your credit card, well, you could have forgotten. But if you paid it late, that's a deliberate violation of the agreement. So good credit. Then, of course, you have to have enough capital. Typically, 10 to 20% of the overall amount needed. And that doesn't have to come out of your pocket, but you have to come up with it from sources other than the loan, which is usually the world's oldest source of business financing, friends, family, and fools. The F-cubed source. So good credit and good capitalization goes a long way. The other thing is, if you're considering going into business, go to a bank, give your business to a bank that does commercial lending. Now, there are a lot of people out there who are of the liberal persuasion who feel that they want to keep their money in local thrift to keep George Bailey going. That's very noble, but when you're in business, you need a business bank. And once you get a business bank, meet the business lender, meet the loan officer. They want to know you. It's better to go for financing with somebody you know. So just having a, hey, how are you relationship is fine. As you approach going into business, start giving the commercial lender your annual tax returns for the last 3 years. He'll start a file for you, and he'll know that he has that information, and he's not going to have to demand it from you every year like he does some loan clients. They hate that. When I had business loans, I made sure that every year, as soon as my tax return was in, my business lender had a copy of it and a copy of my financial statements. So that's it. Good credit, capitalization, and a relationship with the lender. And the SBDC has relationships with all the lenders. When I was an SBDC counselor, bankers wanted to take me out to lunch every day. I could have gained 100 pounds a year because they want good loans. And they know that the SBDC is a source of good loan clients, because we put together with the client the loan package. And if we don't think it's good enough, the bank doesn't see it. So they get good loan applications from the SBDC counselors. So once you meet your local SBDC counselor, you can talk to them about the financing sources that they would recommend. And they work with the non-traditional economic development lenders more than anybody.
Absolutely. Our local office here in Albany, and then also one I work with in Canton, we have a list of those lenders for folks. We won't necessarily make a recommendation, but we have all those resources for lenders, for accountants, for a lot of different areas of business that folks need. Also, I think we're mentioning here is our research network to help out research some of these franchises. So any research related questions that folks have on a franchise, our research library can do some research for you for free, and they have access to a lot of databases that are not publicly available because we pay for them and we like to provide that information. So I think that's worth noting. We have a couple more questions. Folks, if you have more, definitely feel free to type them in. This next one's from Elmer. Which part of the FDD items is the most important section for the potential franchisee to review?
The one with the bad news. And I'm afraid you're going to have to find out which one that is. I told you what to look for in each and every one of them. I think I told you that the fight, of course, financial disclosures are important, but I told you how the sampling may be biased. The agreement itself, you should understand it. And if you're serious, you should have a lawyer review it with you. SBDC counselors are not supposed to be substitutes for lawyers and accountants. We don't do the legal work, we don't do accounting work, but every day we help people with those kind of issues understand what the difference between a corporation, LLC, and a sole proprietorship is, things like that. So the counselor can probably help you understand these legal things, but remember, they're not lawyers. You're not getting a free lawyer and a free accountant with these guys and gals. You're getting help to understand when you should go to the lawyer. And lawyers charge by the hour, so the better prepared you are, the less time the lawyer needs and the less you will pay. So counselors can certainly prepare you to come up with the right questions so that you get the most for your hour of lawyer time.
Absolutely. This next one comes from Leo. When do you think a startup truly becomes a franchise? Where is it where business model is proven? How many years do you recommend a franchise be in business at the minimum?
Taking the step to franchise is really big and involves a lot of legal work. I've had people say, well, I'm going to franchise my restaurant and I'm going to go nationally. Well, I don't think they understood what that meant. And I've tried to explain what franchising means. It's a different business model. A franchisor is different than an operator. I think certainly to take the step to franchising a business, you need more than one unit operating. You need probably at least three in diverse markets, so you can demonstrate that your concept has wide appeal as opposed to just the market that it grew up in, where it was a hometown business. You need to develop all those detailed operating manuals. You need to have those three or however few operating units you have operating extremely consistency right down to the way they look to the customers driving by. If you think about how important consistency is, think about McDonald's. They make billions of dollars by selling extremely consistent product, mediocre product. I mean, nobody ever said that McDonald's hamburgers are the best, but you know exactly what you're going to get anywhere in the world when you go in and order a Big Mac. In the same environment with people dressed the same. It's like the Twilight Zone. That's how scary and consistent this is. But that is the most important fundamental of going from operating units to a franchise. You have to have it down to a specific, consistent operation that you can turn an operator into in a week. If you're operating a restaurant and it takes you 3 weeks to train a cook, you're not ready to franchise. If you can train somebody who's never cooked to operate your restaurant in 3 or 4 days, now you have a franchise. Now you have something you can take on the road.
Thank you. And all of those folks who you answered questions for also said thanks back, so they appreciate those. But I do think that's the last question. I thank you so much. Again, put those links in the chat if you need to make an appointment with a New York SBDC advisor, or if you're outside of New York State, you can go to the SBA.gov website and you can search for local assistance, and that link is in the chat as well. So Peter, I appreciate it. I don't see any more questions. I think we're good.
Okay, it was a pleasure.
Absolutely. Lots of thank yous rolling in. And again, I appreciate it. I hope everyone has a great day.